Okay. Sorry for the delay, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for this How to Get Published webinar. Today, we're going to be focusing on how to promote your article and increase visibility. So I'm going to introduce our speakers today. So first, we have Jessica Lipowski, who is publishing editor on the Sage Journal's editorial team. She works closely with editors and societies to help navigate the publishing process and develop key strategies. We also have Shonom Skarisprik with us today, who is a marketing manager on the author marketing team at Sage. He is based out of New York and has over 5 years of experience in the publishing industry. He's passionate about helping other authors, especially those in the early stages of their career, to navigate the publishing process, and hopes to equip authors with the tools to self-promote effectively. We also have today Kристианом Ваккари, who is Professor of Political Communication and Director of the Center for Research in Communication and Culture at Loughborough University, UK. He studies political communication by elites and citizens in a comparative perspective, with a particular focus on digital and social media. He is the editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Press Politics and past chair of the Information Technology and Politics section of the American Political Science Association. And finally, there's me, Maria Tissot. I am marketing manager in the author marketing team at Sage, and my work is focused on helping early career researchers get published. You can send us your questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A box on your screen. We will have around 20 minutes at the end of the session, the presentation, to answer them. And if we are not able to answer all the questions that we get, we will follow up with you after the webinar as well, so do not worry. So I'm going to now hand it over to Jessica to start the presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the next webinar in our How to Get Published webinar series. So today we'll be focusing on how to promote your research and increase that discoverability and visibility. So looking at the author journey here, you can see where we are in that process. I just wanted, before we start, this is more focused on the submission process and thinking about the actual writing process, what that means in terms of discoverability and how to help people find your research. So Google and Google Scholar have established themselves as the first port of call for researchers today. For instance, they account about 60% of referral traffic to our Sage Journals platform. Therefore, it's really important that your article can be found easily in search engine results, and particularly Google's. But not only that, other search engines and browsers that are used around the world. Well, if no one reads your findings, what is the use of disseminating your research? So it's important to think about how you're writing your article. Search engines will be looking at the abstract page of your article, which is free for everyone to view on the Sage Journal's website and many other publishers' websites. Also in other indexes like PubMed. So your abstract is not only the sales pitch that tempts the researcher into reading and downloading your article, but it also gives search engines the data that they need to be able to find your article and rank it in those search result pages. While you might add this a little bit later in the writing process, it's helpful to think about your end reader before you even start writing so you can better outline the vocabulary and the phrases needed in your writing. So with that, include important keywords in your title and your abstract. Naturally repeat the most important key descriptive phrases where appropriate and without losing that natural flow of the language. So as I mentioned, think about what phrases a researcher might search for if your paper were to be of interest to them. Google can definitely detect abuse of this, so don't overplay it or stuff in those keywords unnecessarily. Just focus on 3 or 4 key phrases in your abstract and allow the text to flow in that easily digestible manner. SEO, or search engine optimization, makes it more likely that your article will be downloaded, which can then help downloads, citations, and ultimately the impact factor of the journal to which you submit. And so then the easier your research it is to find, the more citations it will receive. It's a cyclical process. While search engines today use a secret, complex mathematical algorithm that change constantly, and they consider many different factors, and they do not disclose the weighting or importance of each criteria, some of these tips that we just mentioned are things that can help with discoverability. So search engines factor elements like volume of incoming links from a related website, the time a user spends on the website, page titles, quality of content, relevance, volume, and consistency of searches, spelling, uniqueness, keywords. So with all of these factors, it's important to think about what users might be searching for when trying to find your research. Now, post-publication, that is really where that promotion comes into play. So congratulations, your paper has been accepted, but the work does not stop there, does it ever? It keeps continuing. So once your paper is accepted, you'll sign the contributor agreement before the appropriate materials are sent over to the production team. Once exported into the production system stream, the article starts by going out through copy editing and typesetting, and then you as the author will have one more chance to review your article in its final proof form. The editor will often review your article at this stage too, and once all of the articles and edits are compiled, a new proof is generated. And then most publishers, including Sage, will publish the article online ahead of print, or what Sage calls online first. And so this means that your article is fully discoverable and readers can already download and cite your work, even if it is not yet placed in an issue, a print issue. So this is key. So you can start promoting your research as soon as it's available online. We'll focus on this a little bit more in other webinars. We've touched on this in past webinars, but just wanted to send some reminders. Depending on the type of journal you have published your article in, you have a variety of options when it comes to sharing your work. Sage has created policies and options for authors publishing within what we call hybrid journals or subscription-based journals to make sharing content as easy as possible. Our author reuse policy states that authors can use the final published PDF of their article in a number of ways listed here. So for instance, in your own teaching, when sharing with colleagues, in a dissertation or thesis, which is coming up in our January webinar, or in a book authored or edited by you. Perhaps most importantly, you can use the original or accepted version of your content anywhere at any time. This includes in preprint servers, institutional repositories, bigger repositories such as ResearchGate, your own website, or on social media. This is a more permissive policy than most publishers allow for. So I caution you, do be careful to read any contributor agreement you sign and be sure that you know what you can and can't do with your articles. Maybe you've published in a traditional subscription title, but you've made it free to view. If it's free to view, that does not mean it is necessarily open access. So permission is generally required to reuse content from these type of articles. If you've published open access, this can be reused and published anywhere. Looking at the CC Creative Commons license that you've published it under, but typically this can be reused at any time, although full attribution must accompany any reuse. But do recognize that the reuse terms do not apply necessarily to graphs, figures, photos, things that might have third-party permissions, so not original to the article, and so further permissions may be required. That being said, there's a couple of different ways that you can promote from the Sage Journals platform, whether you're using your original or accepted manuscript, maybe you're using the share button feature to share that content with other colleagues, and what have you. But there's a variety of options available to you. Christian, over to you.
I think you are on mute, sorry.
I am so very sorry. So social media, what to do and what not to do about them. We often hear that authors and even editors are reticent to promote their own work. And there is, a culture in academia, in some corners of academia, that suggests, your work should speak for itself. But unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, we live in an era where research keeps coming out through journals, through preprints, through books, and there is simply too much than people can possibly read or even pay attention to. So it is really important for you to be a good advocate for your research, an honest and humble advocate, but an advocate nonetheless. There will be differences in the extent to which different publishers, different academic societies and editors will engage in promotions for the journal at the article level. I try to tweet as much as possible about the articles that get published in the journal I edit, but sometimes I hit a bad streak where I'm just too busy for a few days and I cannot do it, and so I fall behind. But you should feel free to ask the editorial officer or the publisher how they'll be promoting your article besides publishing it. Different journals have podcasts, video series, or other initiatives that might be relevant to the promotion of your work. But you can and should be pushing readership of your own article in your own right. I've just received an email from a colleague who sent me links to articles they just published, and I found it useful because I'd seen one of them but not the other. So with tact and with politeness, having an email list of colleagues that you think would be interested in your work can be a good strategy. But social media are, of course, much more powerful because potentially they enable you to reach a much broader audience. Twitter tends to work best for academics, but as you might have noticed, there is a lot of convulsion around Twitter these days as a result of Elon Musk acquiring it and making some very sudden, very abrupt changes that for the moment haven't gone down particularly well. And at least in the academic communities I tend to network with, there's a lot of criticism and a lot of people have left. And most people have left to Mastodon, which we'll be talking about in a second. You should find the social media that you feel most comfortable with working on, and also that you feel is more appropriate for sharing your article. You need to find your community, and that community might be in different corners of social media. You should also consider suggesting use your article in classes to colleagues. Again, perhaps by way of a recommendation, like, hey, here's something I published. I hope you find it useful. Don't, without imposing it on them, but also, again, understanding that for most of us, we are too busy to even pay attention to everything that is being published, let alone read. So your email or your direct message on Twitter or your message on Facebook Messenger might be the difference between your article being noticed and not being noticed by a colleague. Sage also publishes a blog called Sage Perspectives, where authors can write a post that is designed to be read by a general audience, and that can increase your readership and also help you practice reading for a general non-specialist audience. There will be, of course, many blogs that will be relevant to your article as well in your country, in your discipline. It's always a good idea to try to make your scholarship approachable and understandable. You could, of course, ask your university to also issue a press release. Universities are increasingly keen on trying to publicize the work that you do. Do make sure, I would suggest, that the press release is 100% accurate in the conclusion it draws from your article. There have been cases, especially in the medical sciences, where some press releases have been have mischaracterized at least the implications of some of the things. So you want to be a good scientist as well as a good communicator. Again, as mentioned, you can always send or post the original or accepted version of your manuscript anywhere if you publish with a Sage journal. But otherwise, you should use the links to the final published articles to lead people to your article. And many of your colleagues will have access through the university subscriptions, or if your article has been published, open access. In terms of Twitter and Facebook, make your messages personal. Ideally, you don't just want to say, here's a new article, here's the title, and here's a link. Try to tell a little story about it, why you were interested in this topic, how you came to study it, what you were surprised about, who helped you along the way. Try to make this a story about the journey of research and publishing, not just a news flash about yet another new article. Images and videos tend to be more engaging, and they tend to be picked up by the algorithm, which will make your post more likely to spread. So try to use at least one image if you cannot shoot a video, which might not always be something you can do or something that is appropriate. Always link to your content, other resources that support your content, like the website of your research center, of your lab, your personal website, whatever you think will help readers make sense and better understand your work. An article is a big accomplishment and is usually a good opportunity for people to learn about your broader work. They might not know you yet, but they might really like your article, and that's an opportunity for them to learn more about the research you've done before publishing that article. And also feel free to post, any good feedback or media attention you receive. Repetition is okay especially on Twitter, because people don't always log on, and because of the algorithm, most people will not necessarily see what you are saying at a given time, but obviously be reasonable in doing that. Hashtags could be important, so use them as relevant. Try to identify the hashtags that people are using. For example, on Twitter, when there are big international conferences or even smaller workshops, there is usually a hashtag that people are using. And even though you're not attending, using the hashtag might be a good opportunity to throw in, here is something I've recently published that hopefully is of interest to the people attending this workshop. And that could be, again, another way for people to learn about your work, which, again, you shouldn't feel embarrassed by doing, because, we want to learn, academics want to learn. We just don't always have the time and the information that we need to learn everything that is out there. You will get responses through social media. On Facebook in particular, I found it very useful to connect with groups of associations or of divisions within those associations. So I'm a political scientist and a media communication scholar, and I'm a member of different political communication, political science, journalism, and media communication groups on Facebook. Don't be afraid of posting your article across all these different groups. Pay attention to the rules of these groups, though. Some groups will say no self-promotion. This is only for things that are more like call for papers or opportunities. But if the norms in the group are that people are posting some self-promotional material, then don't be afraid of engaging with those. You'll get responses. Make sure you reply. You might get some criticism. That's part of the job. It's not different from any international or national conference you might go to. And as in those situations, try to be generous and humble, accept criticism and stand up for your work. Show your accomplishments, but try to remain humble. Don't boast about them, but point them out in case people find them helpful. We encourage you to monitor responses and replies, but be respectful again, and keep an open mind about what people are saying. Sometimes their criticism might sound unfair, but sometimes it might be the spark for the next paper you want to write. Other platforms could be relevant in different contexts: LinkedIn, Mastodon, Instagram, and YouTube. Some communities do rely on LinkedIn, which is an interesting one because it's also closely related to businesses and charities and civil society organizations. So it might be a good place to network with a slightly less specialist audience, but still an audience that is very valuable and particular. Whatever you're using, include your articles in your profile as you build your career, as it should be on LinkedIn, as it should be representative of your CV. YouTube videos can be a good ways to spread news about your articles. Some journals will do that for you. They will work with you to create video abstracts. Others will not do that, but you could create your own these days with a decent webcam and some skill and some rehearsal and a little bit of editing, which you can do with free software that comes with your computer. You can produce a pretty decent, short abstract summary of your research. Don't make it too long. People don't particularly like to listen to the same person on screen talking for too long about research, but make it short and sweet and informative. Infographics, videos, or even perhaps a visual abstract like a collage of images and charts would work well for Instagram, but Instagram doesn't support linking as easily as other platforms. You can have a link in your bio, but not in an Instagram post. But now most of Instagram happens through stories, as I'm sure many of you know. Stories only last for 24 hours, and they can include a combination of images and videos and text superimposed on it. And importantly, they can also include a link. So you can create a story about your article, embed a link into it. The story will disappear for 24 hours, but it can remain accessible through your user's profile via the highlights function. So you can include create a category of highlights that include all your published articles, so that people who are interested can go back and look at all these stories for those articles. Mastodon, this is the new flavor in town. It's very, very early days. It's a free, open source and decentralized social media platform, which embodies some of the values that at least some of us in academia think should inform our public communication. Anyone can create his or her own version of Mastodon, which is known as a server, and people can have rules and regulations that apply only to that version. Servers can talk to each other, so users that have profiles in one server can also engage with people in other servers. Mastodon visually resembles Twitter, and it is being proposed as an alternative to Twitter, but its user experience is more like Discord, which is a talking and texting app where people join servers that have their own cultures and rules. This is very popular, particularly in the gaming and the game streaming communities, but is becoming more relevant elsewhere as well. So on Mastodon, when you sign up for an account, you can post toots, which is Mastodon's versions of tweets. These toots or posts can also contain video, links, and other features. To me, it reminds me of Twitter, 7 years ago. And it might develop in similar ways, but it might develop in different ways, given that it's a different technological era and it's an open source and not a commercial entity at the moment. On Mastodon, you can boost other people's tweets, which is the equivalent of a retweet, and you can favorite those tweets, which is the equivalent of a like on Twitter before the Twitter algorithm changed, so that likes also contribute to some degree to spreading the word about the message. So when you favorite a message on Mastodon, you're not making it more visible. To make it more visible, you need to boost it. Like I said, it's very early days and it's unclear how this is going to develop, but my suggestion is, try it out, open an account so that you can secure a username that you like, and you can secure a presence there, and then see where that takes you. And over to Sean.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some additional promotional materials that you can share. So these materials here can help expand the reach of your content to a non-academic audience, because this content can be easily understood. First, we've got a plain language summary, which is similar to an article abstract in that it summarizes your writing in very succinct style. But a plain language summary is unique in that it's written without any technical terms or discipline-specific jargon. So the intention is that anyone, whether in your discipline or totally outside of academia, can understand an overview of your research. Video abstracts and infographics also provide key information about the findings of your article, and this is conveyed in a brief and graphic format. The aim is to assist researchers in finding the most relevant article and allow them to visually evaluate whether they would like to pursue the article and delve deeper. These resources are valuable both pre and post publication. These can be submitted with your article, and they will undergo peer review. Post publication, they can be used for self-promotion. They can easily be shared on social media, in listservs, or with your colleagues. If you're interested in creating any of these, you can check out Sage Author Services, which will allow for subject area experts to create them for you. So next, you've already written and submitted your article. It's just been published. The next step is to think critically about how you'll share the information in your article with a wider network. Since this will include people outside of your specific subject discipline niche, or maybe completely outside of academia, it's important that you write about your work in an accessible, digestible way. Doing this can have huge benefits. It can help you enrich the public discourse and offer solutions to big problems. It helps to bring academics to the forefront in working through scientific, cultural, and clinical debates. By writing in this way, you'll not only impact the discipline, but you'll also expand your personal profile. Writing other articles or being interviewed will help you to raise your profile and ultimately expand your network. So to get started on this, think about some types of stories you could write. You could write a highlight on new research, featuring new science or new techniques. You can write something that succinctly breaks down a topical issue in a way that's easy to understand. Or you can share a personal story connected with your research discovery and how you came about writing your work. So if you're interested in writing about your research in a blog post, some options you have are creating your own blog or potentially reaching out to industry blogs. In addition, Sage also actively maintains the Sage Perspectives blog as a way to post content about articles, in addition to post on trends in the publishing industry and other applicable topics. Whether writing for Sage Perspectives or another blog focusing on your article, keep some of the following tips in mind. Topical, timely, and recent research will receive the best reaction and will be most likely to be accepted. Papers focusing on new or significant findings also tend to be the best fit for blogs. If you have complex subject matter, please be sure to explain it in a way that a public lay audience would understand and appreciate. Should your article be accepted for a blog post, create a draft and send along a headshot and a bio as well for inclusion with your post. Be ready for a blog representative to review your post and potentially suggest edits and updates. So next we have a short case study from the Sage Perspectives blog. You can see the impact of publishing, how the impact of publishing a blog post helped the research spread. So the author marketing team coordinated a blog post written by the authors of a research article published in Educational Research on projecting the potential impact of COVID-19 school closures on academic achievement. And this was posted across relevant social media channels as well. This blog post received 730 unique page views, and the article received over 35,000 accesses since publication on October 28th of 2020 and has an all-metric score of 377. So next, we can move to the next slide. Perfect. There are a number of sites that are specifically dedicated to helping you develop your author brand. So thinking less about the individual work, but more about yourself as selling yourself. So the first one, you can create a profile on the Web of Science Reviewer Recognition Program, which was formerly Publons. And this is mostly for tracking the review work you've done. So this will allow you to track all the individual reviews you've done across all the different journals, and it shows how you've contributed to your field. It's an easy way to ensure that you get credit for the work that you've done. Next, there's Kudos, where you can link to all of your published content. One great benefit here is that it's really easy to share content from Kudos onto social media platforms. So it's a nice, easy way to have that connectivity and also to share your work with your wider audience. Next, we've got ORCID. So when you claim your ORCID ID, you can ensure that all of your content is linked to you. It's really helpful if there's another scholar who has the same name as you. Everyone has a unique ID, so you don't have to worry about being represented more than once. You sometimes need an ORCID ID to submit on SageTrack, and this is the case for most journals, but it means that it will automatically update your attributed publications on ORCID when the article is published. And last, you want to create and maintain a well-organized author profile on Google Scholar. Even though most articles will be automatically indexed here, having an author profile enables researchers to better control the information that is shown for each article. And perhaps even more importantly, it allows people who stumbled upon one article to explore your other scholarship. So it allows for a wider spread of all of your work. Overall, generating and maintaining profiles across these accounts will ensure that you're accurately credited for your work and will help spread the reach of your scholarship.
Thank you, Sean. I was looking for my unmute button. Just to close out here and to kind of emphasize and hone in on everything that Christian and Sean have been speaking on. Once your article is published, there's a variety of ways that you can track the impact and visibility of your research. So some of those clear metrics are in downloads, citations, and altmetric score. So the number of downloads is total views and downloads. That includes the HTML version and that final published PDF version. The number of citations, there's a couple different platforms that are tracking citations. Mainly we focus on Crossref and Web of Science, but there's a couple of different places that you can look. Web of Science is the main one that ties into an impact factor for a journal. So they might have a slight discrepancy, a slight variation between the two platforms, but that's one way you can track that. The altmetric score, so you'll see that here where it could be a little icon, it could be a little donut representing all of these different colors. Altmetric focuses on other visibility, so mentions on social media, mentions in the news, blog posts, policy documents, patents, what have you. So not just citations. So these are 3 different numbers and metrics that you can take a look at that might be relevant for what you put on your CV or bringing back to your institution to show the impact of your work. It's important to keep track of this for that reason. You want to show the impact. So maybe you need to provide these numbers to your institution or your grant funder to say this is what we have accomplished. But don't be discouraged if citations take a little longer to build up than the altmetric score and usage numbers. Citations often take time to accrue and is discipline specific, and it could be content specific. So we've seen a significant uptick in citations and downloads for COVID research. That's quite natural given the current state that we're in. Some research might take longer to be cited. So don't feel discouraged. Keep track of these metrics and watch as things grow. Also remember that any articles citing your article have to go through the writing and publishing process as well. That's a big reason for why it takes so much time. In most cases, although you may get a few same-year citations, article citations tend to reach their peak citation rates at around the 2-year mark. So continue to focus on those promotional efforts and outreach and ensuring that those researchers who work in the same field know that you've published your article. So just to reiterate what Christian was saying, you want to share your work, yet remain humble, be mindful of the different platforms that you're posting on, understanding the rules of different groups or institutional listservs, to be mindful. But at the end of the day, you are your best advocate. That being said, the journal and the publisher often have a variety of different ways, as we've covered today, to help promote your research. So we're all working in tandem. It's not just one entity that makes an article successful. It really is a team, a group effort to help get your research out there and into the right hands, to the right researchers. Going back to the theme of our webinar series here today, you want to focus also on the readership of the journal. So going back into that journal selection process, thinking about the aims and scope of the journal to which you're submitting, thinking about who is reading that. So what journals are you and your colleagues reading? That will also play a role in where your research is getting published and how visible it will be. You will also want to think about the different indexes that the journal is indexed in. My apologies for the redundancy there, but that will also play a factor to see where do you normally go to look for relevant articles in your discipline. Is it Google Scholar? Is it PubMed? Is it your institution? And like Christian mentioned, many of your colleagues will have access to various journals through their institutional subscriptions, or the article might be published open access. So there's a lot of great tools here, a lot of great information that we've been discussing here today, and we welcome your questions. We've seen them coming in. Just before we get into the questions, wanted to cover some of the upcoming topics. So our next topic will be on January 18th, where we explore how to convert your thesis or dissertation into a manuscript ready to be published in an academic journal. We've seen this topic and this question come up continuously. So thank you for your questions and feedback. We're really excited to talk about that in our upcoming webinar after the holidays. And we also have the first half of our 2023 program outlined, so be sure to take a look and sign up for any relevant webinars that you might be interested in, or share it with your colleagues. We point you here after each webinar because there's a wealth of resources available on our Sage Author Gateway. So it's a dedicated space for author support and services where you can visit additional how to get published resources, previous recordings of our other webinars in our series, and answering common author questions. It also reiterates which version of your paper you can share, when and how and why and on what platforms and for what reasons. That's probably one of the most common questions that we receive. I've even seen a question come in today about which version you can post to ResearchGate, for instance. So to ResearchGate, you can only post the accepted version of your paper. So that would be the paper that has been finally accepted, but not yet sent through to production. So it includes all of the peer reviewer comments, all of your revisions, but it's not the final typeset PDF. But you'll see on the Sage Journal's website that there's a share button. I highly encourage you to use that. It helps track those downloads. So rather than sharing just the final PDF with your colleagues, if you use that share button, it will provide anyone free 90 days read-only access to your article, whether or not they have a subscription through their institution or affiliated association. And this is a great way to keep everything within the main article itself, so you can track those metrics, which you can then report back on your CV or to your institution or grant funder. So be sure to check out all of the different resources on the Author Gateway, including translated materials as well. With that, we will pause here and for questions.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for this really great presentation. I have seen quite a few questions, so I'm going to put them out to you. You can decide who wants to answer which, but let me just open them up here. So I think someone had asked about using apps like Telegram and WhatsApp to promote your article. Do you have any advice on that? Is this something that is a positive effort?
I mean, I can take a stab at this. So I think it really depends on your community, right? If your community uses these apps, then by all means, you should meet your audience where they are. You know, Telegram has the ability to reach, you know, the groups on Telegram can be huge. I think it can be up to 30,000 people or something like that. So some of these channels are really broadcast channels. Of course, they're also used for propaganda and for other things, but that doesn't have to mean that you should not use it for your own research. Same for WhatsApp, you know, in different countries, you know, it's very popular in Brazil, for example. So it might be that there are some small communities of researchers in Brazil that use it for day-to-day communication. If you think it's appropriate, share your research there. Use the same rules of engagement that you would use on any public social media platform. The one thing that you might want to think about is, even though we think about these platforms as private, because we often use them to talk one-on-one with our spouses, partners, friends, and hobby mates, everything you can say there can become public because it can be screen grabbed, it can be shared. And like I said, Facebook and Telegram enable relatively large groups where you don't really know who your audience is apart from a few that you know. So treat those as public, is my advice, and use them if you think that's where you're going to find the people that are for whom your research is relevant.
So I'd like to second that. I totally agree with you there. I think as researchers, you're busy. There's a lot going on, and I don't think that it's, you know, if your audience is not on, let's say, Instagram, I don't think it's worth taking the time to promote yourself on Instagram in this way. The same thing, if your audience is not active on Twitter, don't do that. Make sure you focus on what will get the most investment, what's worth your time. There's no point in like really spreading yourself too thin into a number of different areas where you just won't see the benefit.
Agreed. Just to close out, and I agree with everything that Christian and Sean have said. Yeah, some disciplines like OT are very active on Twitter. Some image heavy disciplines like pathology is more active on Instagram. You have groups that are more active on LinkedIn or Facebook. So it's really finding that right platform and that right niche, and where you also feel comfortable. Christian talked about that. Where do you find your colleagues? Where do you find your voice? How do you feel you can best express yourself in that authentic way?
Yes, I would just add as well that it's very important, whichever social media network you choose, to make sure you're building your engagement over time, and to not create your account and then just post, you know, the day you publish your article, here's my article. It's very important to build an audience over time and to engage with it, to be an active participant of it, and not just someone who's just putting out information that has no engagement with the community. So I think especially on Twitter, it's really essential to be active. So if you're going to make an effort, you should probably start quite early in the process, and not when necessarily the article is out already. There was a question here. Let me just find where it is. Sorry. So someone is asking, and I guess it's similar to what I just said, but someone is doing their PhD and they're asking whether they should start already, you know, promoting themselves even before they finish and even before getting published. Do you have any advice on this?
I think, you know, social media can also be very useful listening devices. So you can get in there and start following people, start discussing their work, amplifying it. You don't have to always have something to bring to the table, and as in, I'm doing this, I've done this, I've published this. These are useful ways to network as well. You know, you meet people, you know, I'm old enough to remember when people gave each other business cards at conferences. Now, I don't do that anymore. Some people still like doing it, and it's also a cultural thing. But for me, when I meet someone at a conference or in person, or they give a talk in my university, I check whether I follow them on social media, whatever social media I'm using. In my case, it's Twitter for now, Mastodon probably in the future, I don't know. But that's also a useful way to keep sort of like a Rolodex, like a contact list. So I would say start using them. You don't need to talk all the time. I think, you know, it's a good point that you need to engage, but you don't need to always have to talk if you don't have something to talk about. You can talk about research you like, you can talk about research you're reading. That's also a very useful service to do for other people, because again, we're always busy, and any recommendation can help us find research that we might not have found otherwise. So I would say, yes, build an account, be, you know, keep it quiet. Don't feel too much pressure on yourself. Don't get overwhelmed. The other thing I will say, especially for, you know, younger, early career scholars, don't get overwhelmed by other people's accomplishments. There is, you know, academics have this thing which is called imposter syndrome, where we never feel we're good enough. We always feel there is somebody out there who is cooler than us, publishes more than we do, raises more money than we do, gets more interviews than we do. And here's the secret: it never ends. You could be at the top of the world and you're still going to feel it. And social media can sometimes amplify that feeling, because you see a lot of people posting about their accomplishments. You're like, oh my God, I haven't submitted that paper yet. Don't let that drag you down, because you know, we don't publish our failures. Some people do. There's a colleague at Exeter, Jason Reifler, who is a political scientist, and his pinned tweet is a long thread of his failures in terms of grants he didn't get, articles he got rejected, jobs he applied for and didn't get. So some people will be open about their failures, but that can also be, you know, disconcerting in itself. What I'm just trying to say is, use those platforms as places where you can get something useful for you. Don't let people's accomplishments make you feel that you're not doing enough or that you're not good enough. But by all means, try to be there and try to engage in a way as you would, engage at a drink reception at the end of a conference.
That was beautifully said. I have nothing to add. I think that's great advice, and thank you.
I think I would just add one thing and say that early in your career is kind of a time to somewhat experiment. You use social media personally, you use social media professionally. So if you're using one channel personally and you think that you just want to keep it personal, you just want to share pictures of your family that's separate from your research, that makes sense, and you dedicate that toward personal, but also think critically about how there's a way, if there's a crossover between those two worlds.
That's a very good point. And thank you all for that very informative answer. We have a question here about, it says, my research paper is published, but my thesis is still in progress. So I am scared if I promote my article, will there be chances that my work or data is misused? Do you have any advice?
I mean, I'm happy to go first. This is obviously complicated, and I think you are the best judge for what is safe for you to do. Maybe speak to your advisor, speak to other colleagues who are on social media. There have been horror stories of people's work being appropriated. I think as in science in general, we're getting better at spotting these occurrences and punishing those who commit these acts. But at the same time, because of the internet, there is so much information out there that there are lots of opportunities for mischief. I think, the degree of openness you want to have depends on the data you have and how valuable those data are to you. There are some disciplines where open data has become the norm. And so you need to publish your data set, perhaps with an embargo of a year or something after you get a publication accepted. I don't see reasons why you should share your data before you've published on it. But again, that really depends on the kind of data you have. It might be that by sharing your data, you can facilitate some collaborations, but your data, of course, is very valuable if you've collected it yourself. There is a broader point here, perhaps, reading between the lines, which has to do with, originality and people, grabbing ideas from others and running with them, especially, groups that have a lot of money, big labs, big research units. And, you might feel, oh, I'm a graduate student, I don't have any money, but I've done this thing, I've got this idea, and then, maybe someone else hears it and runs with it. Those, again, some of these behaviors are no longer tolerated in most corners of science that I know of. But obviously, you need to be aware of these potential risks. I'm not saying these risks don't exist. I'm saying try to strike the right balance between getting some feedback and getting people excited about your work without giving up things that people could, that are unique to you, to your idea, to your research design, to your research infrastructure that you've built, could appropriate.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Christian. I know we've talked a lot about the importance of using social media these days. And someone asked, they don't have any social media accounts, and presumably they're not interested in joining any. Is this going to be a real problem for, visibility of their research? And if so, what are some other ways that they could be promoting? I know we mentioned during the presentation blogging and various other things, but do you have any advice in this case?
So I could jump in first if that's okay. I think this is a great question. And obviously we talked a lot about social media today, but I think it's really important that you promote where you feel the most comfortable. Obviously, we've said a lot, we think social media is super important, but if it's not something you can do or willing to do, there's a lot of other alternatives. whether it's sending a simple email to your colleagues or whether it's promoting, in some other way. I think it's also really great if you're able to lean on others for social media. So for example, you share with your institution so that they can share on your behalf. At Sage, we share information, journals share information, societies share all of these things via social media. So you will have coverage on social media, whether or not you are able to actively engage there. But definitely I'd recommend flexing what other skills you have and what other channels you like to use.
Great points. And just to add there, going back to the indexes like Web of Science or PubMed, thinking about where a journal is indexed and that those discoverability components. So when you're writing your manuscript, talking about those keywords, the title, the abstract, and the flow of that language, thinking about what other people would be searching for, whether they go to Google Scholar, PubMed, or another platform. So that would be another avenue in a way that you can contribute without having to necessarily be on those social media platforms.
Yeah, and another little thing that I might add is you can have a simple but informative personal website. They are searchable, findable, and they could be a good gateway to finding out about your work. I think in my experience, people will find you through one of your outputs, through one of your articles. And I think you want them to read the article, you want them to engage it, cite it, but you also want them to have you on their radar, right? You want them to consider you one of the people that they will be looking up whenever they want to see what's going on in that particular discipline that you're doing research on. So if you have an updated website, it doesn't have to be fancy, you can build it for free using many different services, but it can be very informative and very useful for people.
I think I would also add as a last point that if you are someone who enjoyed writing and writing for a wider audience, we talked about blogging, but there's also the option of having a newsletter, an author newsletter, which you can over time, build an audience that will follow, your content. Again, this is something that I would only recommend if you're someone who is interested in writing and has the time to commit to it. It is time consuming and you have to, it has to be something that you're consistent at. But if you are and you are interested, newsletters are great ways of keeping an audience engaged and also, promoting yourself here and there, obviously not over promoting it. So not sending out an email every single month, every single week saying, here's my article, please read it. But, adding content and talking about your research. And as we discussed earlier, the importance of storytelling when it comes to this, what makes your research different, what makes your journey, what you went through, your experience of this particular piece of research different from others. That is something that a lot of researchers are interested in, and not just researchers, people who are maybe not in the field, but are curious about that particular aspect of your discipline. So a newsletter is another great way of building an audience if you're not on social media as well. I think we might have time for one more question. So I think someone was asking about they don't necessarily have the time or the skills to build other sort of visual content, infographics and videos, for example. I know we mentioned that there are, various places out there that you can search for, but do you have any recommendations of words of websites or softwares that people can use for this kind of things?
So I mean, we have to say we have Sage Author Services, which is a great way to provide that content. So plain language summary writing, infographic creation, and video abstracts. You're paired with a subject area expert, so someone who is very cognizant of your area, and they're able to work with you directly in order to create these things. So that's definitely we have to say it's a great way to get that done.
just to chime in and add on to that, that is absolutely a great tool. You might have alternatives through your colleagues or your institution, maybe even the journal. Some journals have someone that's been kind of put in charge of that type of role that can either help provide a template for you to create that visual abstract, or they might create it themselves. Some institutions provide that type of service already for you. So you could ask what's available on campus. You could also ask a colleague for help, or maybe someone on an editorial board that seems to have published quite a few visual abstracts already. So you can take a look around. There's many different alternatives, paid for, free, or some kind of combination in between.
Thank you both for that. I think we are going to have to wrap up now, but thank you so much to you, Jessica, Sean, and Christian, for your wonderful presentation. And I hope we have answered most of your questions. And as I said, if we haven't, we will follow up with you after the webinar. So watch out for an email from us. I will be also sharing the recording links and slides with everyone who attended, and a certificate of attendance. So watch out for that. And I think that's all. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And I hope to see you in 2023. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.